Hi, I'm Vikki Locke with C2 Communications, and this is DF Talks. For over 50 years, Downing-Frye Realty has set the standard for excellence and professionalism in Naples, Bonita Springs, Marco Island, and Estero real estate markets. And joining us today is Dr. Shawn Clem, Research Director at Audubon's Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here, and tell everybody a little bit about Corkscrew Swamp and what you do there.
Yeah, Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary is a National Audubon Society property. We've got over 13,000 acres of old growth bald cypress. It's the last remaining stand of its size of old growth bald cypress in the world. So it's a really special ecologic treasure. It's kind of like walking into old Florida and seeing what this area looked like before we were all here. And it's a really, really special place for that. And, in terms of protecting the water resources as a wetland and protecting the wildlife that are native to this area. And what I do there is I run the research program. So we, actively manage 13,000 acres, and we use science to guide that management and also to guide some of the policy decisions that we make for in terms of making recommendations on responsible growth and some of the environmental issues in our area. And we use science to guide that. So I'm in charge of collecting those data and analyzing those data and ensuring that, we're having opinions and doing what we need to do based on sound science.
And it is kind of an international treasure. You talked about it being a hidden gem. It's really important to the world.
It is. It's where we're recognized by the Ramsar Convention as a wetland of international importance. Just a couple of years ago, we were recognized as the first site in Florida that is a wetland of distinction. That was a recognition by the Society for Wetland Scientists. We're also an important bird area, a national natural landmark. So it's a really, has a lot of value, not only to residents and visitors, but in terms of its ecological value, it's really important and recognized across the globe.
Now, somebody just moving to Southwest Florida, like myself, a lot of talk about red tide. I want to touch on red tide for a second. Can you explain a little bit about what it is and how we're dealing with it?
Sure. Yeah. Red tide is a naturally occurring dinoflagellate. It's a little microscopic organism that lives out in the Gulf of Mexico, among other places in the world. And so the organism that causes red tide is naturally occurring. It's usually dispersed across the Gulf. But what we think of as a red tide is when we get kind of a bloom or an overabundance of this little critter, and that causes a lot of damage ecologically. It kills, fish and sea life, and we see those kind of effects washing up on the beach. It also, when the algae itself comes up, it causes a lot of respiratory problems. And red tide is a little bit of a head scratcher for scientists. We're still trying to understand it. We know a lot of the things that cause it, and it's a really complex combination of things that cause it. Everything from, the amount of the sea surface temperatures and the amount of fertilizers and nutrients that come into the water, in addition to some other things, like some of the chemicals that blow over to peninsular Florida from Africa. The African dust, the Saharan dust, is also part of that equation. So it's a really complex thing. There are some things that we know that make it worse and that we can do something about. But we also know it's naturally occurring, and there's only so much that we can do about it.
Wow. So water quality, when you think about the planet, is important, but water quality for homeowners is probably pretty important, keeping that water healthy for the future of the economy here in Southwest Florida.
Absolutely. That's the reason we're all here, right? And that's the reason that people come here and people come to visit us here, and that's what drives our economy. So we all need, our local environment to be healthy. And that means not only our coasts and ensuring that we've got clean water on the coast and are able to do what we can to limit things like red tide, but it also means our fresh water and, the clean drinking water that we all depend on, especially being, on a long, thin peninsula where we're surrounded by salt water. That freshwater resource is particularly important for us too.
So this could mean losing money if the water quality isn't up to par and have a major impact on real estate prices.
Absolutely. And we see that through tourism every year. Every year we have a bad red tide or the blue-green algae that blooms that we were seeing. We see tourism drop off, and we know that's what drives our economy. And obviously it's visitors to the area that are, new potential residents. And I think it's a really important connection.
So what do you think we can all do to be better citizens here in Southwest Florida?
Yeah, there's a few things that we can do, just in our own yards. And I mean, there's obviously things that we can do in terms of, supporting decision makers who are, have our environment in their best interest and things like that. But there's a lot of things that all of us can do, even visitors to the area can do. And that includes things like protecting our water resources, ensuring that we're keeping our beaches clean and keeping our waterways clean when we're out, recreating and things like that on the water. Homeowners especially, have the choice to, in a lot of cases, to limit fertilizer use and limit water use. Our fresh water, the connection, I think, between our fresh water, the rainwater, we get 60 inches of rain per year here in Southwest Florida. And most of that comes in those summer months, June, July, August, into September. And all of that water, we get so much water at a time that we create a tremendous amount of runoff. And a lot of that fresh water runs right into our canals, our retention ponds, and eventually into the Gulf. And so limiting nutrient use, especially during those really rainy months, things like fertilizers and pesticides, limits the amount of chemicals that are ending up in our waterways. And then limiting our water use the rest of the year is important because we're preserving the fresh water. We're all pulling water out of the ground for our drinking water here. So the connection between the inland fresh water and our coasts is really important, but it's also important for us as residents to have clean drinking water. And so, limiting water use so that we have a good supply of drinking water is important. It's also important to limit that water use because of wildfire. And that's another thing, especially in inland parts of the county. If we're not talking about flood in the summer, we're talking about fire in the winter and in the spring. And, using too much fresh water is over drying our landscape. And that's what leads to those large wildfires. So it's a really dynamic environment here. And I think just being attuned to some of the local environmental issues and, figuring out ways that you can do your part to help reduce the burden on our land so that we can, enjoy the beautiful things that we came here to be surrounded by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how can we get more information on everything that you just talked about?
There's a lot of great, local resources. I would, point you first to Audubon. We've got a lot of resources. If you go to our website to learn more about water use and responsible, growth and wetlands and the connection between our water and our fish and the wading birds, which is another big part of, why people come here, just the beautiful wildlife that surrounds us. There's a lot of other local resources, both through the, Collier County, Rookery Bay, Conservancy of Southwest Florida. All of these local organizations are really, working hard to educate and to, provide the information that we need. To be responsible. I think we all want to do the right thing, but you're exactly right that you need to know where to go to find those tools.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And certainly, we'd love to see folks come on out to the sanctuary and check out just the beautiful glimpse of what old Florida really is.
Oh, it's spectacular. And if you'd like more information on perhaps becoming part of the Downing-Frye family, you can check out their website at downingfrye.com. Bye, Dr. Shawn.
Bye. Thank you.